And welcome back, college hockey fans. It is NCHC on our MNCAA family of podcasts alongside Max Veech. I'm Nick Maxson, and finally, we have some good news to talk about, especially if you're a St. Cloud State Huskies fan. Some troubles with Duluth, but they were up against a pretty good opponent themselves. And as we approach the last 2 weeks of the regular season in the NCHC, shall we see the matchups really starting to kind of become the focus here of, who's going to go where. Miami mathematically somehow officially eliminated just as of now from postseason contention. So unlike years past where everybody got to the dance, Miami will not participate in this year's NCHC Frozen Faceoff / postseason tournament. So with that being said, Max, you're not on the road. Welcome back home. And it's been good weather around the Twin Cities the last few days.
Yes, it has. I cannot say how delighted I am to be back home and not having to travel again this week here, and to have it be in a week where we're enjoying some of the fruits of what the weather is providing us. Fruits of not our labor, but we're being rewarded for a long winter.
Yes,
and I'll just leave it at that. I mean, it's not pretty yet. We're still at the point where it's melting outside and everything's kind of sloppy, and it's not brown because we don't have salt, but it's brown because of all the just dead stuff that's been rotting under the snow for a while. I'm finding some squirrels on walks with the dog that I'm really hoping I don't have to see again, but we'll see. But yeah, I think things are looking up here. The one thing I wanted to question you on, and maybe you know more than I do because you have some more inside baseball knowledge. Yeah, is that Miami not being allowed to or not participating in postseason play? I thought at the beginning of this season, it started out as 8-9 would have a play-in game to see who would get the last spot. And now it's just that 9 seed is out. When did that change? Was it before the season started?
I think they did make that change. In fact, I'm actually going to pull up the postseason tournament here for the NCHC because essentially, here it is. They actually have a spot. Future format tournaments. So talking about the 2025 tournament, it says only the top 8 finishers in the regular season will qualify for the playoffs. And then starting 2026, essentially it will be the exact same because remember, St. Thomas will join 26-27. So when that changed, I don't know, and I'm even trying to remember, Max, because I know that the original release was 8-9 would be a play-in game, and then effectively would face the number 1 seed. I'm wondering if that was a proposed, shall we say, format, or whether that was the official format. I don't remember, if I'm going to be honest with you, but it is weird nonetheless that essentially, in a college hockey environment, or shall we even just be more broad, college athletics, viewpoint, that a team is not going to be able to participate in a conference tournament. That it's kind of weird, isn't it, Max?
Yeah, very. I think it was just, what was it, 2 years ago that it was, I think it was Miami again, knocking off the number 1 seed at the first part of the NCHC postseason tournament there. I think it was Denver that had lost to him in that first round as well, but I might be misremembering. It could have been CC and not the 8 seed or whatever. So obviously we still have a chance for 8-1 or 7-2 or whatever it ends up being, because that's the number of teams that are going to be in the postseason. It's just not Miami that's going to be able to upset anybody. So
right.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some thoughts on it. I think just given how this year is working out overall, probably an okay decision. Because we're changing in 2 years when St. Thomas joins, I don't know that I've got too many qualms with it. I just always love the underdog stories and making people play the games rather than giving people free buys. So, yeah, there's positives and negatives to everything. I don't see a major issue with it this year just because Miami hasn't been really competitive in conference. Going 0-20 so far this season is not something you can really defend.
Yeah, it was nuts, right? And I think what you're referring to is 2019 was the last time Miami got to the Actually, nope, I take that back. So I'm going through as you're chatting the NCHC Frozen Face-Off results, and I'm trying to find that one because right now I haven't been able to find it because I'm going back year after year. I'm in 2018's bracket, so geez, it's just maybe that is just for that old Max.
It must not have been Miami. It must have been a CC.
That was Colorado College. As the 7th seed is what you were thinking. Let me go back. That was relatively recent too. Well, Colorado College was I guess, they were the 7th seed in 2023. They did play Denver and then took down Denver in that semifinal to play St. Cloud State in the final in the Xcel Energy Center. A big boost there for the Tiger squad, who, again, funny, St. Cloud just played at the Colorado College Tigers this past weekend. So how ironic that stat came to play. Miami hasn't been, I don't think, in the time I've covered the team since 2017, I don't think I've seen Miami at the in St. Paul. So it's been a rough go. Now, I've seen the social media posts. I get it. Why don't you switch? And I think one of the maybe more hilarious ones I saw, Max, I want to get your take on this, is the NCHC should swap Minnesota State Mankato and Miami. And I think that's a first part of your reaction pretty much tells you where you're at. Again, first year under Noreen, that roster is probably going to turn over quite a bit. But more importantly, it's who's going to come into that. If you've watched the commitments for Anthony Noreen kind of come to the public sphere, he's gotten a good chunk of them, like 14 or 15 commits. But they're decently skilled players that are coming into the Miami pipeline. Again, very successful coach at Tri-City, has a lot of connections at the USHL. And that seems to be the new sort of pipeline for even college coaches. You have to spend some time and to be competitive / be a winner in the USHL, because, again, from that pocket, from those relationships that you build, that's where you can get those recruiting taps put into, right? So, Max, your reaction for that swap there, Minnesota State and Miami?
While it is intriguing, I do laugh at it a little bit every time it's brought up, because Minnesota State has applied to be a part of the NCHC multiple times and been denied multiple times. And I think we talked about it this year when Arizona State was accepted, and then St. Thomas got kind of fast-tracked in there as well. A lot of that has to do with the financials and facilities and some of the other deciding factors from the league on that one. So that's where the laughing comes in. It's not laughing necessarily at the program, but just at the circumstances behind it. And so, as it relates to Miami being relegated out of it, I'm a fan of relegation, despite the fact that my team has been struggling the last 3 years. I think it is good for most sports. I think that's probably the only thing that keeps soccer interesting to some fans. Now, I'm going to get a lot of hate for that take, maybe, because those fans seem to be very passionate about it, and that's fine. I'm well prepared and well well versed, in receiving some hatred. So, as far as the Miami getting relegated talks go, Brad Schlossman, for covers North Dakota and NCHC and college hockey in general, very well versed in all of it, more so than me, and much more eloquent than I am as well. I put out a statement here. I think just before we were recording, somebody had thought about this same concept, and he's like, "There's no talk about Miami leaving the league. Great town, great facilities. Goggins Ice Center is an awesome place to go play. Can confirm. You can win there. Miami has commits from 2 of the top 12 USHL scorers and a third who could be a first rounder. We've talked about him last week or 2 weeks ago. This will be Miami's best recruiting class in a while, but it will probably take time." So very similar things to what we've been saying over the last couple of weeks, or just the season in general. We're all waiting for the Miami turnaround. It certainly isn't here yet, but it's coming, and we're not the only ones that think that. So give it some time here. If it still doesn't work out 3 years from now, then maybe we start having these conversations. If they're bottom of the NCHC for a decade, that's where you start having some of those tougher conference discussions, and maybe they do want to move out just to be in a little bit more competitive area. But I think that program, that team, that coaching staff is going to have a much better future than they've got currently. So more of the same. It's just waiting to see it happen.
I've got a counterpoint to that, Max, because here's the thing. Before 5 years ago, I would say with the landscape in college sports, and I say that broadly because so much has changed. I don't disagree with your take. In fact, again, when you don't have the success, meaning the wins and losses, that affects recruiting, that affects, overall long-term success of the program. And at the end of the day, that was pretty much all you had to worry about, right?
True.
It's different now. There is no incentive. And I would even tell folks, and mind you, I want to be careful when I say this, because this isn't a lot of the undertones too from this conversation is the CCHA is worse. Now, you could argue that it might be just because of the results that have been there, right? But this has nothing to do the reality of today's, and when I say today's 2025's college hockey and sports landscape, is it's about the money. At the end of the day, if Miami goes down to the CCHA, and when I say down, and again, it's not a relegation. It is just from the fans' perspective, it's that league isn't quite to the same par as the NCHC, whatever. We can have a separate conversation about that. But you want to talk about what hurts them in that sense? Again, you're playing the best teams in college hockey every single week. We're going to talk St. Cloud here, finally breaking a streak. And that streak was horrendous because if you just focus on the losses and you don't watch the actual games, I've had spurts with even our own group chat from our old MNCAA crew that just simply thought that it was just, it was goaltending, or, this team is plagued. And it's just like, well, okay, sure, but watch the games, and I can guarantee you'd be just as befuddled and bewildered as everybody else watching this team. There are reasons why Dave Starman and other pundits who know the game pretty well came out and said this team is going to turn it around. I don't think they thought it would take this long, but they did, right? So, but back to Miami, there is no incentive financially to move to the CCHA. In fact, that would de-incentivize you. Why would you go to play in, essentially quote unquote competition that, as we look at the pairwise standings, would be, shall we say, less competitive than that? Yes. There's a thought, I think, in competition that says, I want to be in a spot where we can win. We can say, hey, we're going to win the CCHA. But here's my counterpoint, Max. How many teams has the CCHA put into the conference tournament year after year?
Yeah, one or two. I don't know the last time that they had three in there.
I don't think it's been three. I think it's been one or two, and it's been majority one.
Yeah, it's largely been dominated by your Minnesota State and then Michigan Tech when they had a couple of good, relatives that were all playing for them at the same time.
Oh yeah, the Beatles.
Outside of that, you're not seeing a ton of representation. You had that Bemidji appearance when they shut down Cole Caulfield at the beginning, and that was 2019.
19, yeah. That Bemidji State team. That
I mean, that it's not like it's been crazy to see some other teams get in there, but you're certainly not getting widespread representation where from the NCHC you're getting Denver and St. Cloud and UMD and North Dakota, and like a good representation, a good mix from your entire conference. And from the Big Ten, you're getting your Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan State and almost everybody from that conference in your postseason play. And Hockey East, more of the same. The ECAC is pretty similar in the fact that they turn over the same 3 or 4 teams. When you've got your Quinnipiac, your Cornell, Harvard every 5 or 6 years, and then every once in a while you'll see somebody else jump in there. So a similar situation in the ECAC, and then Atlantic Hockey is whoever wins their postseason tournament is who's going to make it in there. RIT had a shot at making a couple of postseason bids as an at-large team, but that didn't end up working out. So it was either them or AIC or whoever won that tournament. So I would say that it's certainly not and shouldn't be thought of as a lower or lesser league. It's no different than conferences in professional football. It's probably the most realistic comparison I can give, where you see the AFC South and they've kind of sucked in the last couple of years. And maybe that's not fair for me to say because I just don't watch as much of their games. But from a results standpoint, that's just, it is what it is. And so you think of playing them and you think it's much easier, and it's kind of what it's been lately. Now, do they have any less importance to college hockey or sorry, to the NFL?
No.
You can make it arguments there from a revenue standpoint or a relevancy standpoint or whatever, but they're all still a part of a larger program. So
yep,
it's just different. I wouldn't say it's more or less or otherwise. It's just different.
It is different, and at the end of the day, right? I just don't think the NCHC just expanding 2 teams would want to be in a position where they're kicking out one of their own founding members, unless really there was a financial issue at play, which from everything that I know is part of the reason why Minnesota State Mankato as a school, right? And mind you, because it's not just about the hockey program, it's about the full financial stability of the school. Essentially it's what's taken into account when you talk about adding teams, subtracting teams, right? Unless there was a fiscal reason to, Miami ain't going anywhere at the end of the day.
Yeah, and then you get into the talking about financial reasons and everything else, the NCAA lawsuit or settlement that's happening, and there's the clarification that came out semi-recently that if you're a school where you have programs that largely play at the D2, D3, whatever, different divisional level, but you have one program that goes up and plays at the D1 level, which Duluth has and Minnesota State has, and you've got some of these other programs that don't necessarily abide by the NCAA rules, regulations, and everything else at all levels.
Yep.
Yeah, as scholarships, it gets vastly more confusing and complicated. So there's more at play than I'll really ever know, especially when you go to some different schools and different conferences. But we've seen it with AIC moving down. We've seen it with a couple of these other programs either moving up and not being being allowed to play, which I still think is an insane rule from the St. Thomas standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something you just kind of have to watch and ride along with, and pay attention to as a fan of college hockey, so you can kind of speak on it when you need to, and have those conversations and maybe question it if something doesn't seem right. But I don't know enough about it at this point to be able to say what's going to be the best for the league, and I just have to trust that these other conference members do. And I think there might still be, speaking of financials as well, I'm going on a couple different tangents here, but does Miami still have, or any NCHC member, if they leave, is there still that $1 million buyout fine or whatever it is to leave the conference?
So 2 different topics, right, Max? Because you're basically discussing where if Miami says, I want out, I'm going to pay a fee that's my exit money, right?
Yep.
I think what most folks are referring to is the other option, which essentially is a conference vote out effectively. Sure. I don't think in that sense that would apply a sort of, shall we say, an exit fee. Sure. But I don't know that 100%. So those are 2 different things. Essentially the opt-out clause of the $1 million would be if Miami says we're done with this, we need to go somewhere else, I'm going to pay you this money so we can essentially escort ourselves out effectively. And again, to me, there's nothing in there that would say that's the better move for Miami right now. So
right.
But again, as we mentioned, right, the landscape is constantly changing, and that could be where. Just to completely troll us, how about this in 3 years, Max? Miami is the NCHC's #1 seed at some point. That would be the ultimate troll. So,
it would be.
It's not impossible at the end of the day. It's not impossible. And here's the thing: a Miami turnaround makes this conference even more appealing to me, because now it's like you're not going to have, shall we say, that the one team that unfortunately just has this aura around it that says, oh man, it's a tough go, and maybe for the players on opposing squads that says, all right, well, this is Miami, all right, here we go, we'll play the games, we're sure, whatever. Where now it's going to be, this is every single weekend, not that it isn't now, is now for sure an absolute gauntlet. So with that being said, Max, it's time to review
I was just looking what the team futures are for Miami. I was like, what would I need to what would I need to put to make a significant amount of money on? To win the NCHC, to become NCHC champion, they are at plus 30,000 right now. So if you put $100 on, it would be a $30,000 win. I am not recommending anybody go put $100 on Miami to win.
Well, yeah, that's giving the casino your money at this point because they are mathematically eliminated from that potential. So
correct.
Yes.
So it would be insane to do that. Let's just say if they were allowed to be playing, that would still be crazy. But I'm wondering what their odds are to make the postseason tournament next year. And that probably won't come out until the season has ended, just the way that the lines are put out for college hockey in general, which is a whole different beef that I have. And don't have the time to rant about it today. But I was looking to see if that was released anywhere right now, and it's not. But I might be tempted to throw $20 on Miami to make it, because I know that their odds are going to be very, very long to make it next season. And I still don't think that they will, but is $20 worth having a separate narrative to follow next season? Maybe.
And who knows? We've seen crazier turnaround stories in sports before, right? Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? Probably not. But hey, it could be a fun horse to ride. Who knows, right? Speaking of horses here, Max, we need to talk about this weekend's games. We'll start with UMD. Wolf is probably, unfortunately, the right, shall we say, emotional reaction. Unfortunately, just too much for UMD and their weekend series. Again, and I think maybe the worst part about this is maybe a couple of, if not one key injury that comes from this weekend too. So why don't you fill me in on what happened this weekend and kind of go from there?
Yeah, I mean, talk about key injuries. Plante leaves game one. I don't even know if he finished period 2, but he was missing for a large part of that and all of period 3 in that Friday night game. It was hard fought, really close, ends up in a 2-4 loss. One of those is an empty netter, so realistically it's a 1-goal game going into it. Joe Molenaar and Blake Bechen, 2 of the guys that you don't see on the score sheet all that much, but they're absolute grinders. I think they deserve to be on the score sheet. The problem that UMD had in this game, and it was, a problem that they've had all year, the last couple of years, giving up that first goal and giving it up early, you feel like you're trying to battle back, and they just weren't able to overcome the hurdles in front of them there. It wasn't a well-executed game, I would say, from either standpoint. I think both teams were 0-for-3 and 0-for-2 on the power play. Credit to UMD for not giving up any power play goals, but the struggles that they've got scoring continue here. That used to be an area where you would get one. I would say if they got 4, they'd probably get one, just based on the math and how it works out for them. But I can't guarantee that. I wouldn't say that they had, any super high expected goal shots on any of those. They weren't getting the production that they normally do. It was a relatively high penalty game, 11 penalties in this one. 4 of those were coincidentals for, roughing at the end of P1. And then you had an additional 2 that were coincidentals at the end of, near the end of the game, I should say, when there was scrums breaking out or whatever. But my biggest issue with that was, and this will be a shock to many, and if you have a problem with it, you call me up, battle me online. I'll pull the receipts. And respond to them with the game highlights there. But Wilkie could have been called for interference on a one-way penalty against Max Plante on 3 separate occasions over the course of 15 seconds. And instead, he's allowed to push him into the net, going around when the puck is nowhere near them, and then put a stick on the back of his neck and hold him down until the puck gets pushed under him again. And then Max Plante gets up after dealing with this and sticks up for himself, for lack of a better term, and then they both get thrown. And it's crazy that it ends in a 4-on-4 instead of a UMD power play to finish that game out. And I was frustrated with that to begin with. And then on top of that, you had Semptimphelter flopping. I think it was 3 different occasions where they were reviewing it for goalie interference, for sure 2, but I swear it was 3 on that one. And I don't remember him doing that at ASU, and maybe it's just because I didn't watch those games because they weren't in conference all that much. But that was incredibly frustrating to watch over and over again. But like I said, the Friday night game I had less of an issue with, despite the end there. And Wilkie, unfortunately for me, was the one that puts in that empty net goal, so he gets to benefit from the chicanery, shenanigans, the theatrics, the whatever is going on there. So me being salty there. UMD played a good game, just didn't get the result in that one. And then we go to Saturday. I don't know if it was that. I don't know if it was the injury. I don't know what it was, but that game started out with a bad blood feeling, and it just continued on for the remainder of that game. 21 penalties in that game overall. There was quite a few in a scrum, which I'll get to in just a second. UMD down 6-0 at one point, which we'll get into why again in just a second there, with Shaugabay being the only one that ends up scoring a power play goal to finish the game out. So really terrible look on the score sheet. Even if you're following it, it wasn't, a slow burn. It was all kind of happening at once in one onslaught or barrage there. But period one ends scoreless. It was 12 total shots, 7-5. I forgot which way was which. Even game to start, and then it wasn't. Knapp started this game. Gajan started the first one. They're just swapping goalies at this point, which I think is probably the right move, given the pedigree of Gajan, but play of Knapp to this point. And if you get a result one night, you might get your start the second night, and that's just kind of how Sandelin has been working it. But what the big storyline in this one for me is the skirmish that ends up happening. I think it had to be in period 2 there, pretty relatively early, maybe midway through the period. But it was clearly instigated by North Dakota. And then you've got Sacha Boisvert, as talented as he is. I'm going to start talking pretty poorly about the kid. Goes up and punches 2 different UMD players, Molenaar to start, and then I forgot who had lost their helmet on the side there. But there's 2 clear incidents of contact to the head, one without a helmet on, and he doesn't get a 5-minute, let alone 5 in a game, and they even up penalties and just play 4-on-4 hockey from that point. Insane to me to begin with. And then a minute later, UMD feeds into the frustration. I can't defend Jack Smith on this call. It was absolutely unnecessary. Should have been 5 in a game for an ejection, whatever. Hit somebody in the back. And so UMD is playing down a man for an extended period. That call would not have happened had the Sacha Boisvert call happened correctly, in my personal opinion, and correct opinion by the book if you're actually reading it and looking at it. How it's missed, I don't know. They reviewed it for 10 minutes, whatever. That call would not have happened and not given UND a 5-minute power play. So would it have changed the game? We'll never know. I would say still probably not. I think it would have changed the narrative of the game for sure. I don't think that you have a continued, roughing happening throughout and the bad blood and everything else. I think that Jack Smith's penalty, which was a dangerous one, could have been eliminated. Calling it earlier. I'm going on a rant. I am
Where's your soul?
perturbed. I am perturbed. I more or less. Yes, this was a terrible loss for UMD. Would they have still lost? Maybe. Who knows? They were not given the opportunity to play a hockey game. They were defending themselves. And so part of my frustration is coming from the discussion online, the discourse, if you will. UND fans, shocker, are saying, why don't you stop the one-timer? Obviously, it's wide open. No, duh, it's wide open. Like, you're on a power play. You have an extra guy out there. You should have a guy wide open. Like, if you don't, you're bad at running the power play in your hockey game. Whatever. Overall, UMD played fine, and I was happy to see Semptimphelter not get the shutout, specifically for the Friday flops, but more specifically for pushing the net off blatantly, maybe more blatantly than anybody I've seen outside of, I forgot who did it in the NHL. They just turned around and pushed it off. But that's essentially what he did. And it took him 2 tries to get it off. He's a weakling. I don't know. He's a loser. And it was that own penalty that was the last power play where Shaugabay scored on. So he caused it himself. That made me happy. And then while I'm on this train, and I'm going to get plenty of hate for it and just called a loser that's complaining, I'm going to complain about EJ Emery. The kid misses the Friday game because he was already fighting previously. It was him in the Denver game to end it there. I think it was with Zeke Bouillon. So he's missing the Friday game. He comes back on Saturday and gets 3 different penalties. So we'll put a question mark in here for a bookmark. When you get 3, what's the number of penalties you have to get in a game before you get a game misconduct or ejected for just going out there and getting too many minors? Do we need something like that in hockey? I don't think at the professional level it would ever work. In college hockey, if we're protecting players and there's one kid that's clearly getting penalty after penalty after penalty, are you going to start enforcing that more to change the play and keep it a hockey game and not power plays or a fisticuffs match? Like, I don't know what the answer is there, but I would like to see it enforced on EJ Emery personally right now. But that might just be me being salty. It boils down to UMD losing to North Dakota over and 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 over again. 8 times in a row, 11 of the last 12. It might be 12 of the last 13. I don't remember if that number was before or after the Saturday game. Frustration boiling over on the ice for the Bulldogs and on the airwaves, internet, whatever, for me as well. Mental fortitude, smart play, not there for them or me. I'm taking accountability for myself as well. Need to be better all around, especially at this time in the year. So, response.
Oh, geez. Where do I start? There's a whole lot to unpack here. I don't think you're on the wrong track here, Max, because a couple of things strike me, right? Number one, North Dakota has not even really found themselves really this season, right? They've had lapses in their game on a lot of both sides of the puck, and I think more so in the pipes with goaltending. And I think, for lack of a better phrase, and tell me if I'm wrong, they smell blood in the water with a younger, less experienced squad that they felt like they could get into the heads, and this was more of a gamesmanship type weekend with allowing the emotions to boil over. And you do have some kids that just they take it upon themselves to play that role, right? Now at the end of the day, am I for that? No. Am I surprised? Is because you and I played the game and we understand that's just kind of how it happens sometimes. Yeah. That's how I read it. Now, if that tells you anything, more and more so in the big picture with UMD, what it tells me is that should concern you come playoff time effectively with NCHC, right? Because it's not that there will be more of the, shall we say, the penalty situation that you saw. You never want to see that. But there are going to be more, shall we say, game within the games on the ice between the benches. And that's the kind of thing that it seems like UMD kind of got trapped into this weekend. Sure. And that's a symptom to me of just a younger team still trying to find their way at the Division I level. And again, the injury doesn't help again with Plante. And when you're only able to essentially put in one power play goal, again, the 5-on-5 scoring is something we've talked about in the past. That just has to be there too. UND is not a great team. Clearly, they're not a bad team. And it's this weekend, apparently they wanted to make a statement as far as who they think they need to be on the ice. And unfortunately, that was against your Bulldogs. Am I reading that correctly?
No, you nailed it. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I think that there's a little bit more that goes into it for them. I think they're on the bubble of being on the bubble for postseason play right now.
Right.
There's still technically, mathematically, an at-large bid in play. I think they're at 17 or 18 in the pairwise right now. We've talked about needing to be at that 13 mark. Technically, that's at 14 right now, just given where Quinnipiac is at. That might change by the time this is out. I know UConn is playing tonight, and there might be a couple of the other shifts that happen. But they're if they sweep, the rest of their regular season here, and go a decent amount into the NCHC playoffs, they could technically make an at-large bid there, which we would like as a conference. I don't know that I would like as a rival fan of North Dakota, but
right.
A rising tide lifts all boats or ships, right? So I'm at a conflict. I'm at an impasse morally here on what I want to see happen.
Right.
But yeah, there was a little bit more going into the series for North Dakota than there was for UMD. And I'm sure Sandelin and the rest of the coaching staff and the players that have been there for, the duration of this beatdown are sick of it happening. So eventually it's got to break, and
Yep.
I'm waiting for it. I hope it's, early next year, or, if it just means Duluth can beat them come postseason play and that's the only time we win, that's fine with me. If that's what it takes, then that's what it takes.
So true. Speaking of, and that's a perfect segue into doing what it takes. That was the theme this weekend at the Herbrooks National Hockey Center. My goodness. I said this before we started recording. St. Cloud could have easily won both of those games. In fact, we're up essentially, or was it tied? It was 1-1. Then was it? No, it was 2-1. And then Colorado College scores 3 goals in 3 minutes and 5 seconds, including a very wobbly Russ Tyler knuckle puck from the sidewall that evades Isaac Posh over the left shoulder from I want to say a sharp angle, but it was from the far end wall. And again, when the puck deflects and it starts essentially turning end over end, I mean, that it has a mind of its own. Yeah. And then St. Cloud wanting to challenge that. I will tell you, I looked at the replay at least 10 times. I'm glad they didn't challenge it. There would have been nothing to indicate visually that a player touched it from Colorado College. So I think that was a good no challenge. But unfortunately, a minute later, they score again off of a pop play. Again, just simple hockey sometimes, right? You're driving wide, you go low opposite pad, it kicks out, defender gets beat on the inside, and it's just simply potted home off the rebound. Nothing really much Posh could do about it. It's just a great set play, great execution, and just not being tied in your gaps and, trying to keep boxing out on your defenders, allowing the player to get inside position on you. But either way, it's 4-2 in a matter of minutes. They call timeout. They do get one back at the end of the second to make it 4-3, so it was a good response. But Colorado College put on a clinic for how to essentially play with a 1-goal lead. Just shut down the rest of the entire third period, took that 1-4-3. St. Cloud, it's weird to say when you're on at that point, a 10-game losing streak, then an 11, that after that loss, you say we feel pretty good about our game. It feels weird, right? Yeah. But watching that game and calling that game again, you got the sense that, okay, if they can just put the pause button from the end of the third and start there, we feel good. And talking to Brett before Saturday's game, and again, I don't think I said this enough, but how gracious the coaching staff and the players have been throughout this 11-game losing streak. Honestly, I mean, I can think of other coaches that would be like, I'm not talking to you. The media, I don't want to talk about this. I'm all business, and I wouldn't blame him for it. Honestly, right? You just you want to have that conversation, but at the end of the day, it gets into their heads, right? And Brett has always maintained an incredibly positive demeanor. Going back to film, hey, well, there's some things to clean up, but we're right there. And really throughout this 11-game streak that was in the past tense was there, it really was mistakes that cost them. And it's not a lot, but it was a couple that just you happen to go to the wrong person at the wrong time. So I just wanted to make sure that was out there. But Saturday, 3 goals in the first period. Then they got one back to 3-1. They pushed another one in the second to make it 4-1. You just had a sense in that building and throughout that game, they were not going to let this one get away from them. Ended up taking home 4-2. The place went wild. My radio call was pretty good about chucking a losing streak into the Mississippi. It's the losing streak is over, but it just kind of felt that way, that finally the relief was there. Max is apparently he's sick and tired of me talking about St. Cloud hockey. For those who can't, who are listening on in your car or at home and on YouTube, his camera has essentially, his autofocus has gone crazy. Yeah, it's been blurry visions really also for me at the last couple of weeks with St. Cloud, but I'm happy that that's behind them. Here's the problem. This is the NCHC conference, Max. You don't get to celebrate for too long, right? And I think we were talking to Josh Wilkie after that game. You can tell they were exhausted both mentally and physically. That, they earned that one, but hey, you got Denver now. You got to go on the road to Magnus Arena, a place where realistically the Huskies and really most teams have not had great success with before the last 2 weekends of the regular season. So it doesn't get easier, and that's the part that sucks. And this kind of goes back to the Miami thing, right? Is even when you feel like you're playing the right way and you're making strides from a coach's perspective, from a player's perspective, and you're not taking home a W, it gets to you, right? And this is kind of how St. Cloud streak went. Hoping they can string a couple together. Love a split in Denver, because last time I checked, Max, and we'll get this to you lately, but we're getting close in the numbers game there in the stands.
We are.
But we're going to leave that for another part of the program here. But Max, any reaction when I know I was kind of texting throughout the night too with our group chat. I also mentioned very early they're going to win this one, and sure they did. What was your reaction when you saw the final score up there at the Herbrooks National Hockey Center?
Yeah, that was one of the games that I was switching back and forth between. Was that CC and St. Cloud game, because UMD was out of it on Saturday, if we're being really honest. So dual screening it, one on the phone, one on the TV. I just put St. Cloud on the TV and UMD on the phone later on, because there was just less to watch there. And yeah, you absolutely nailed it. At least for that Saturday game, they were playing with a purpose, and that was a St. Cloud team that we saw at the beginning of the year. And I'm not saying that they didn't show that same strength throughout, some of these losses. They had a tie against a good North Dakota team in there. They've had a couple of other, really close contests. The Western Michigan was a tough series there. Arizona State, kind of tough just in the amount of goals that they had given up. But this is what I expected St. Cloud to play like all year. And it's not dominant by any means, but it's good quality hockey that is well structured. And, when your talent is out there, it is, free to be shown off, maybe not every shift, but you're going to have an opportunity to do it. And they took advantage of it there. So credit to them. They deserved it. Like you said, I haven't seen too much complaining about the team or coaching or anything else throughout. There's always going to be a couple of those fans that are less educated. About the inner workings of what's going on there and what the true problems are. But I think that a good win against a good program like that is one that can catapult you into a much better headspace and get you ready to play in Denver. And that's its own challenge, regardless of where you are in the standings. But should they still have been winless going in here, it's a much tougher task, taller hill to climb, steeper hill, whatever. And now everything seems winnable again, where, hey, we can skate with and have been able to skate with anybody, and we know what winning feels like again. So we're out of it, making it to the postseason in terms of an at-large bid. We have been for a while, but let's go out there, have fun, win, and build on what we just did. So yeah, you got what I saw pretty much nailed to a T there.
And Max, I want to give a shout out to Chris May out the Colorado College head hockey coach. Just one of the most genuine human beings that are out there too. Was talking shop with him before both nights, interviewed him twice. Typically we only do the away coach once, but to him and Mike Gabinet are probably my two favorite human beings on our opposing rosters, just because they actually, I mean, not to say the others don't, but they really, really care. I mean, they're really good people. But Chris made, I think, the best point before Saturday's game was, talking about that third goal for Colorado College, the one that fluttered. And he said, what? Remember, the Tigers started this season 8-0.
Mm-hmm.
And they were a team that in the preseason poll were, I think, 8th or 9th, if I remember, somewhere
top 10. Yeah.
Top 10. And, he mentioned, that was a bounce that if you look at it from St. Cloud's perspective, because that was what was happening to us through our, shall we say, because they had a pretty rough stretch there from about November, January, because it just felt like you couldn't get a bounce, right? It's just everything is. I made the joke with him. It's not like, it's not raining or pouring cats and dogs. Like you're standing under a waterfall. Like you literally just getting doused with whether it's a missed call or a bad call. I mean, just throwing out different reasons. A puck goes off a stick, and in your own net, or you have a wide open cage, a stick breaks. I mean, you fill in Murphy's Law. It happens, right? That's kind of how it felt for St. Cloud, right? You feel like you're playing good enough to at least give yourself a chance, but for whatever reason, when you get a great opportunity, or you just something happens where again you just can't buy a bounce to go in, and then it takes one little mistake for you to get capitalized on. And he just simply said, you know what, we just went to work at the end of the day. And, we took a good long look at ourselves. We didn't, beat ourselves down. We went to the film sessions. We just preached the details and the situational awareness, and we worked ourselves out of it. And he goes, there's no question they will. So at the end of the day, it was kind of interesting to see how at different parts of the season, CC and St. Cloud have had kind of similar, shall we say, hills and valleys, just at different points through the season.
Sure.
And just to hear it from him, to say, you know what, they'll get out of it. I don't obviously wanted it at that night because they're still in contention for home ice, but just kind of shows you that. And this, I do know that a lot of these coaches, especially when you get to the NCAA tournament, they, off the ice, many of them use each other as resources, as sounding boards as they go throughout the course of the season. So with that said, Max, from celebration to, shall we say, a bit of a recap here. So let's take a look at the NCHC conference and their standings. Again, it's Western Michigan's game right now. They're at 47 points in first place solely in the NCHC. Arizona State, after taking a good 4 out of 6 points this past weekend, have kept it at 44. So they're within striking distance of first place. So that is not settled yet. Nebraska Omaha holding serve at 38 points in third. North Dakota, 1 point behind at 37. Those are your top four. Here's where it gets interesting. Denver's at 36. It's outside 1 point in fifth place. Colorado College at 32 points. They're just 4 points behind it. Had they won Saturday, how about that? 35, 6, 37, 38 for three through 7. That would have been quite the numbers line. And then it's Duluth at 22, St. Cloud at 18. So oh goodness. So Max, I hate to say it, but we know what's going to happen in 2 weeks. And at this point, and we kind of were joking about this before we were recording this, is that I think we're both comfortable saying that the team that neither of our squads matches up well against, not that it would just be us two, but almost anybody in the country, is Western Michigan, right? If you can avoid Western Michigan in the first round of the NCHC postseason, probably the better route to take. So these next 2 weeks for both of our squads, we'll put it this way, there's some meaning to it, because if you can, and who knows, Western Michigan still falter. Maybe Arizona State takes over first place again. Had Western Michigan taken 5 points this weekend, they would have locked it in. They would have won the regular season title. They did not. In fact, they only took 2, and now it might go down to the last game of the season. We don't know. So that's where it sits, which means we need to preview our next week's matchup. So we talked St. Cloud and Denver, UMD. My goodness, the Bulldogs. Again, we talk about how crazy this is. It just doesn't get any easier unless you play Miami.
Yeah, this is the spot I was hoping UMD would avoid, though, is that, Miami is 0 for 20 on the year in conference. It's the end of the year. They're just trying to get some sort of momentum, like we just kind of talked about, the same vibes that St. Cloud has. Obviously not the same position because they're just in a wildly different spot, but they just want to win. They want to get some sort of positive momentum for the future. And UMD is a team that they probably feel that they've got a chance to do it against. And they've played good quality games. They've got, good players on their team. They've taken a couple of teams to overtime, St. Cloud being one of them. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that UMD loses one of these games to Miami and gives up a couple of points to a team that really doesn't need them and isn't going to use anything for them. But yes, I would say of all the teams UMD could be playing this weekend, Miami is probably the most appropriate to say is like a get right series for the team, and just trying to make sure that they pick up a little bit of momentum after what happened on Saturday. So I can't be upset about that, and you'd be a fool to be, but with that being said, it's not a team that you can overlook. You can't bank on these 2 games as 2 wins just because they haven't won in the NCHC yet. It's going to be requiring dedicated thought, effort, game plan, and skill on the ice in order to get both of these wins. And it sounds silly to have to say that as a member of the NCHC, because we really haven't been in this position in a while or ever. Here's a question I've got, and maybe I wrote it down in the notes. I don't know. Has a team in the NCHC ever gone winless in
No,
conference play? So
no.
this would be a first, and UMD does not want to be the team that gives them that win. But it's something to keep an eye on for sure.
It is, and I think you hit it on the head, Max, too. Like you said, it's kind of a trap series in a sense.
Yeah.
And we've talked about Miami the past couple of weeks. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago against Colorado College? Miami stormed back to tie that game, force it to overtime. They're not playing dead, right? They are playing 60 minutes of hockey. Just unfortunate, really, that they haven't gotten a conference win. 3 wins all season so far. Again, all those coming back in non-conference early parts of the season. But they're making you earn it, right? They aren't just rolling over and letting you have it. And at the end of the day, if there's any solace, this will be at Soil Arena. This will be on home ice for the Bulldogs, which should help. But again, it's not like that checks the stamp of guarantee and anything. You still have to go out and play 120 minutes of hockey. But let's just put it this way, Max. If you do get the 2 wins, that puts you in puts you in the driver's seat, essentially, right? Because effectively, either one, you will have secured that 7th seed effectively above St. Cloud. Because I hate, as much as I want to see St. Cloud take 6 points away from Denver on the road, historically, that has been a very tough ask for that squad. So if that does happen, let's just put it this way. That would it would change the dynamic a little bit. Shall we say that last weekend? But at the end of the day, still got again just 4 games left in the regular season. I cannot believe it's already here that we're talking about both conference tournament and then eventually the pairwise is going to become front and center here in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, there's only 4 points separating UMD from St. Cloud as it stands right now. So as you said, if UMD can get a sweep here and St. Cloud fails to take at least 4, I think mathematically UMD would be locked into that spot. Now, we had also mentioned, do they want to be locked into that spot? Because Western Michigan, they had an all-time bag fumble there this past weekend. Like we were just talking about, if they took 5